Well, hello everyone. How are you doing? I hope you are having a good night. I meant to do this last night and just got too wrapped up in things. Before we get started, you know, I have to do my little personal things. If there's any ladies in the audience, guys, okay, well, you can pay attention if you want, but this is for the ladies. Frickin' the design of women's shirts. The struggle is real. Look at this. Put the button in the middle. Like we have... Anyway, hopefully I don't bust out of the shirt halfway through the show. My goodness, the struggle is real. Let's do the YouTuber stuff before we get started. Now that I've vented my spleen against the bad design of ladies' shirts. If you are new to this channel, or if you're not, but you're not yet subscribed, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe. I don't know why I stuck those on right then. So yeah, that is, the lighting in here is very bright, so please do subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter. I am Karen Ann Harlos on Twitter. And last but certainly not least, I would appreciate your patronage at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty, or super chats and super thanks. All definitely matter. So we're going to get started in a moment, but let me set this up. And I don't want the Robert F. Kennedy thing here. I need to delete that screenshot because we already did the show on that. This is what I am looking for. But of course, I'm trying to scoot over a little so I'm more centered. The comments will not stay up because we do have a bunch of Matt Walsh clips. It was funny when I was at storage this weekend. There's a volunteer that I work with at storage, Winrich, and he was asking me, why are you so obsessed with Matt Walsh? Actually, I'm not. It just happens to be that I watch a lot of Daily Wire lately, and I need to just start watching some other stuff. Like I was watching Jimmy Snow for a while. I need to add some other things to the rotation, but I found... find them by looking at them. They came up in my playlist. Some older shows of Matt Walsh where he was directly dealing with libertarians. So there's going to be 2 shows that I'm doing on these 2 shows I found by Matt. So they're a lot more on point. But if anyone thought I was being unfair to him in claiming that he just did not understand libertarianism or was purposely setting up straw men for libertarianism, this show should disabuse you of that notion, because he most definitely does. This is a show where he is directly dealing with libertarianism, and the title of the show is, if I remember correctly, it was, Is Libertarianism Turning Left? The title showed me that it's funny because there probably was a period of time where that might have been true. There was a former chair, actually, so multiple chairs ago, that was in fact purposely turning the party left. But this was a video that was about a year old, so I knew it really wasn't from that time period. So we're going to deal with that. Now, I don't know if you're watching this show upstairs, Wayne, but if you are, can you please stop the dog from barking for 5 minutes straight? That would be freaking great, because it's piquing my autism. I just hear that dog going off in the background, and I know you can't hear it, but I can, and it's super distracting. What a libertarian little dog. The minute it's like, oh, I can disrupt a show, I am just going to bark. But let's set up what Matt is talking about, though it's not entirely relevant. And it seems weird for me to be giving you context that isn't entirely relevant, but I know you might be wondering what he was doing this intro to lead up to. And it ended up being a critique of an article from Elizabeth Nolan Brown over Reason. We're not going to deal with that critique. It had to do with some controversy over some adult entertainment websites. Didn't really want to get into that. It was something that was going on a year ago. Don't want to really get into that subject. Want to deal more with foundational principles. One second. Wayne, can you please? Wayne! I might disappear for a second so I could run up there and get him to stop that dog from barking. My goodness. So we don't really want to deal with the article. I know you guys can't hear it. It's really faint, but it's like when the birds are screaming, it just drives me crazy. But he did about this 4-minute intro to his critique of the Elizabeth Nolan Brown article. And that's what we're going to be dealing with here. I know that was somewhat of a long intro. I want to make sure I'm ready with the mute button. So let's go to the first clip, shall we?
Yesterday for this segment of the show, we spent approximately 4.5 hours responding to a couple of obscure libertarian YouTubers. May have seemed like overkill, but then again, if you listen frequently, you know that I could easily do an entire show on one TikTok video that annoyed me, so it's all par for the course.
Okay, right here, I'm just going to agree with Matt. It's pretty funny where he says he could do 4.5 hours on one TikTok video that annoys him, and I totally get it. I could do probably a 4.5 video on just like 2 seconds of Matt Walsh that annoys me. So I feel your pain. So that other video where he was dealing with a couple of libertarians, we're going to do that video next. I actually agree with him in a point. I don't think those libertarians did a particularly good job of critiquing Mac. They certainly had some good points, but I also thought it was really weak in some areas. And I don't know who they are, by the way. I mean, I saw the video, like, it's not like they were like faceless blobs, but what I'm saying, it's not anybody that I'm familiar with. So we will do that video another day, but that's the lead up to it. Why he had libertarianism on the brain. He had just done the day prior to this a critique of two libertarians. And I think the title of that video was The Battle of the Libs or something. But let's go to the next clip.
I think I find libertarians so especially annoying because we have a few significant things in common, and yet ultimately they're still so wrong when it comes down to it. And that's where the frustration comes from for me.
I also feel your pain again, Matt, because I too find libertarians annoying. In fact, every libertarian out there will tell you that they find libertarians annoying. But here is the crux of it. There are some things that superficially we have in common. And the fact, now, Matt either understands why libertarians believe the way they do, but plays dumb in the next clips, which is dishonest, or he doesn't understand it at all, which means he's commenting on things without even getting a basic grasp of it. So he's feeling this frustration, which is perfectly understandable as someone who doesn't hold our philosophy and is like, whoa, we seem to agree on some things. Why do things go so haywire after that initial agreement? I can understand the frustration. Your average conservative, I could understand it a lot more because they're not exposed to differing political ideas outside, the typical conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, echo chambers. But Matt should know better. He's a political commentator. But we need to understand that, particularly when we're dealing with conservatives on some issue where they might think we have some agreement, and then they are completely puzzled when very quickly things go off the rails.
The libertarians are singing my tune when they talk about abolishing the income tax or massively decreasing the size of the federal government. They tend to be skeptical of the government education system, which is good, and protective of gun rights. They are generally pretty consistent constitutionalists. All of these things are good.
Okay. Well, things are already starting to go off the tracks, aren't they? He is showing a truncated view of libertarianism. And I get it, because listen, I don't know all the nuances of every single subspecies of conservative thought either. But when he said that last comment that they are all pretty decent constitutionalists or something to that effect, you know he hasn't talked to very many libertarians. Now, that is true of, and I don't mean this as an insult, your garden variety libertarian. Your average, probably really a conservative, but thinks they're libertarian type libertarians. Anyone who is super familiar with libertarians would not throw that in. They might say some of them are pretty decent constitutionalists, or they might say, well, you know, they support the Constitution in the areas I support the Constitution, but libertarianism qua libertarianism has nothing to do with the Constitution. The fact that he was grounding things on the Constitution, this is where we're going off the rails on a crazy train, because most libertarians, again, there will be some that are strict constitutionalists, and I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to offend any libertarian out there, but the Constitution is not a libertarian document. If that is your grounding, you could have a lot of great libertarian ideas. But the Constitution itself is not a libertarian grounding. Now, if you were going to ground things more in the Declaration of Independence, the Declaration of Independence is a much more libertarian document than the Constitution is. However, okay, but you see where his understanding is coming from. Let's go to the next clip.
They may take it a bit too far sometimes. Like, not all taxation is theft, for example, just most of it is. But still, we line up pretty closely on those issues.
If you don't think all taxation is theft, Matt, we don't really line up on those issues. See, what Matt has done is found a superficial agreement. Like, I'm going to give you a really far out comparison. You know how I always come up with these weird, and I just came up with this right now. So like, this isn't something I planned. But say you had somebody who was a fervent Hindu. So they cherished cows. And then you had somebody who just thought cows were adorable, and they cherished cows too. If they came together on their mutual love of cows, without ever dealing with the reason why they loved cows, do they really have any kind of agreement other than some superficial level? If you don't think taxation is theft, then you do not agree with libertarians at all, even though our views may intersect when it comes to the income tax. Your reason for wanting to get rid of the income tax is completely and utterly different than the libertarians' reason. Just because by happenstance your reasoning happens to lead you to one conclusion that the libertarian also agrees with doesn't mean we have it in common, because our groundings are completely different. Just like the fact that someone who just happens to think cows are cute and someone who religiously reverences them may again be super nice to cows, but they do it for entirely different reasons. So no, when you say they may take it too far, it just proves you're either purposely misrepresenting libertarianism or you don't understand it. If something is coercive force that is violating someone's rights, how can you take it too far to carry that to its logical conclusion? Now, you might say, well, I don't even know if there's any way he could have cured that statement. He could have represented things a little bit more accurately. But as we can see, where it might have seemed like there was some superficial agreement with conservatives, the train is going further and further off the tracks now, because all taxation is in fact theft. Let's continue.
Things fall apart when we move from economic and strictly constitutional issues over to cultural and moral concerns. Here, libertarianism begins to quickly break apart, and the libertarian is left out in the cold, in the dark, confused, not sure which way to go.
You must not have talked to very many libertarians. Matt, just because we don't agree with you doesn't mean that we're confused. Just because we don't walk in lockstep on issues that do not involve force doesn't mean that we're confused. See, Matt values conformity like many conservatives do. The fact that people who hold an identical political philosophy can come to some different conclusions on things they think are outside their political philosophy is completely baffling to him. We are not confused. We just don't walk in lockstep. But he does not understand that. Have I ever seemed confused to you about my position on social issues? You don't have to agree with it, but I certainly do have a foundation. Just because we don't think everything is written in stone and needs to be legislated does not mean that we are confused. And as was said in chat, our reasons, I want to stick this up on the screen because this is actually really good. Let me move Matt down here. So 3Skitu said the people who insist on a dichotomy between economic freedom and civil liberties are the confused ones. Absolutely. If Matt really understood the reasons why we think things like taxation is theft, and our other positions, would then understand that our positions on quote-unquote social issues follow consistently and directly from that, because we don't believe that you can coerce people when they are not violating the negative rights of other people. We actually have quite a robust philosophical grounding. Matt does not have anywhere near the same philosophical grounding unless he is going to bring in primarily religion and his particular points of view, and the fact that everyone brings in their particular points of view. Let me put in his particular moral preferences. That's more what I meant, in which he is willing to violate other people's negative rights in order to enforce them, because he is ultimately a collectivist who believes in the rights of society, not merely the rights of individuals, that he thinks the group somehow has rights that the individual themselves don't have. He never follows that, never really connects those dots, but that is in fact one of the major critiques I've ever had of his particular points. And where he said they're pretty consistent constitutionalists, again, that just tells me right there, Matt, you've never really met very many hardcore libertarians. If you think in any shape or form that our philosophy is grounded on the Constitution, let's pretend that you took me or any other really thoroughgoing libertarian and transplanted them in another country that didn't have our Constitution. Do you think our views would change depending upon what that country's founding document is? Or do you think if we were in another country, we would be appealing still to the United States Constitution? No, the Constitution is merely a tool. And there is one point at which something a former chair said that this former chair I don't agree with on very many things, and that's Nick Sarwark. But one thing he did say is that he agrees with the Constitution where it protects rights, and by that, as a libertarian, we mean negative rights, and he disagrees with it where it doesn't. So he will use it when expedient and not use it when expedient. And that's exactly my view on it.
His ideology is not robust enough to account for the full scope of the human experience. He was mostly right about those economic and constitutional issues, but he was right for, if not the wrong reasons, then at least incomplete reasons.
But you never show any understanding or explanation of what those reasons are. Later on in this video, you're going to completely straw man what those reasons are. But again, we don't ground it on the Constitution, so you're continually bringing in the Constitution is interesting, but at least you acknowledge that this is a foundational grounding principle issue. We have different grounding principles. You don't think that they are capable of encompassing the entire breadth of human experience. Well, I say they do, but what they don't do, that for me is a feature, not a bug, but the opposite for you, is they don't give you a rule book for ordering every single element of society contrary to human freedom. That you think society has to be ordered in a certain way. And if a political philosophy does not give you the power of the gun to order it in that particular way, you find it deficient. What you find deficient is freedom.
He wants to pay fewer taxes and keep his guns and so on because of liberty. And by liberty, he simply means his own personal ability to do whatever he wants because he wants to do it. There are fuller and sturdier reasons to be in favor of gun rights and against overtaxation, but those generally are not his reasons.
Again, at least he's admitting there's different reasons, but he doesn't really say what they are. What are those fuller reasons, Matt? And we're in favor of less taxation because we're against coercion. What could possibly be a fuller reason other than being against coercion if you're not going to sink into collectivism? And where you say that the libertarians' only reason is so that each person could do whatever they want because they want to do it, that's partially true, as if that's a bad thing. Yes, everyone should have the freedom to do with themselves what they will, provided they do not violate the negative rights of other people to do likewise. But Matt can't have that because he wants you to behave in a way that he wants. He is asserting a positive right against you on behalf of quote unquote society, whether you like it or not.
And so when he encounters the deeper issues, the moral issues, he has only his kind of libertine, do what you want mentality to fall back on. This is when he starts shouting slogans like, let people enjoy things, and the government shouldn't legislate morality.
Okay. No, actually what we fall back on is that we do not believe in the initiation of force. And that is the grounding philosophy. It's not, I want to do what I want. Why? I want to do what I want because I own myself and you do not have ownership privileges over me. And the first time I ever heard anyone claim that one of our slogans is let people enjoy things is in looking at this video. Now, I haven't been in this movement for decades, but I've been in it for nearly a decade, and I've certainly been involved at a pretty high level, and I've never heard that slogan before. Did you just make that up? Let people enjoy things. I mean, it's one of those things that's not even wrong. that would be a really stupid slogan. Like, let people enjoy things. Okay, like, that's just weird. No libertarian says that. But we do say, yes, people should be left free to do what they want, provided that they do not violate the rights of others. That is a pretty robust grounding principle. When he says, again, that it doesn't have answers for other things, is because in his worldview, you have to have a black and white rule book for everything. The idea of people taking different paths other than you is very, very frightening to him. And as Mike said in chat, Matt thinks unless you have everybody must follow these rules, whether or not they violate the rights of other people, that is libertinism. If everyone doesn't have to follow the same path and have the same values. We have one shared values. Our shared value is non-coercion. And that is very robust. And it can be scary to people who want a black and white rule book for everything.
Except that literally all legislation legislates morality. All laws, by definition, are rooted in a moral code. They may be wrongly rooted or rooted in the wrong moral code, but completely amoral laws would be laws passed without concern at all for whether they're actually right or wrong. Legislation that doesn't attempt to legislate morality would be, by definition, arbitrary.
Okay, he's partly right. I have heard libertarians and other people, it's not just libertarians, I hear a lot of liberals say this as well, that you can't legislate morality. That is a dumb thing, stop saying it. But he's wrong, partially. Laws do not legislate morality, or at least in a libertarian view. He's saying that even libertarian laws, quote unquote, would legislate morality. No, they wouldn't. They would legislate justice. Now, is justice a part of morality? Yes, but it doesn't pretend to be a complete system of morality, because the bulk of morality is personal ethics that do not violate the rights of other people. Being an asshole doesn't violate the rights of other people. You're permitted to be that. If laws were needed to legislate the full breadth of morality, that's how you end up with the wokesters who think, oh, you shouldn't hurt anyone's feelings, you're being a jerk, or you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't do that, and there's microaggression this and microaggression that. That is just the flip side of what Matt wants. It is legislating what they believe, every single bit of their own personal ethics. So yes, most laws legislate a small sliver of morality that is called justice. At least just laws do, in a libertarian point of view. But he's wrong in that the laws he is okay with or would even advocate for, or even ones that exist today, not every single one of them legislate morality. We have certain laws that say things need to be done in a certain way, like time frames for certain processes. Those really are quite arbitrary. They could have easily been one day longer or one day shorter, and they wouldn't have been immoral. Now, he could say that there's an underlying justice or morality principle in that there are time frames to do certain things, such as statute of limitations or things like that, so that everyone knows what their rights are, and it balances the need between people having the sword of Damocles over their head to get sued for some breach of contract or a car accident or something like that into perpetuity, and while still protecting the rights of the victims to have a recourse. But really, like in Colorado, I think the statute of limitations for a car accident is 3 years. It might be 2 years. I think it's 3 years. That is an arbitrary date. It could have been 2 years and 6 months, and it would not have been immoral. It is a reasonable date that people picked out, but it is somewhat arbitrary. So while he's 90% correct that most laws are legislating at least a subset of morality, some are, in fact, quite arbitrary.
And as for letting people enjoy things, the fact is that enjoyment is not in and of itself enough to justify any act.
I don't have to justify my enjoyment to you, Matt. I know that's a shocker to you, that you think what people enjoy needs to pass with your approval. But guess what, dear heart? No, it doesn't. Never mind the fact that you just made that slogan up out of thin air. I'm just dealing with your arguments. If they are not violating the rights of anyone else, law and politics should have nothing to say on that. Doesn't mean you morally can't have a position. There could be somebody who simply enjoys sitting on their booty every single night watching Jerry Springer reruns, and that's the way they want to spend the rest of their life. I think they are wasting their life, but they're not hurting anyone's negative rights, and there shouldn't be a law against it. That's the point, Matt.
If we're determining whether an act should be legal, or even simply whether it's good, aside from the legal question, we need to...
Now notice how he conflates the two. Whether something should be legal or not has to do with whether they are violating the negative rights of other people. Whether or not it is good is outside political philosophy, at least as far as the libertarian is concerned. So basically, he is railing against libertarianism for failing to provide something that libertarianism in itself thinks shouldn't be provided. So you can't do a circular argument like that. He's pointing to conservative presuppositions that your political philosophy, A, has to be willing to force other people and has to cover nearly every aspect of life. And libertarians just fundamentally reject that. That doesn't mean it's deficient, that we skipped something. We just fundamentally disagree. I hope you guys are really starting to see that no matter what superficial similarity there might be, conservatism is worlds apart from libertarianism. It really is almost like the men are from Mars, women are from Venus type difference.
Ask more than just, do people enjoy it?
Well, good thing that that's not all that libertarians ask. We don't merely ask, does someone enjoy it? Well, I suppose you can enjoy not enjoying something, because like somebody even enjoying something isn't a requirement. Like say you have some libertarian who has it in their head that the only way they're going to have a reward in the afterlife is if they suffer in this life. That if they deprive themselves in this life. And there's been aesthetics. There's been, I don't know whether any of them were libertarians, but there are certain branches, at least of Christianity, and I'm pretty sure like in Buddhism and stuff, where this extreme deprivation is considered like the route to enlightenment or reward in the afterlife. They're probably not enjoying that deprivation, but you should still be permitted to do it. So it's not even that libertarianism would say you should just be doing whatever you enjoy. You actually could be permitted to do something that makes you knowingly miserable because you think there's a trade-off later.
Take almost any self-destructive and harmful act, and you'll find people who enjoy it. That is, they take pleasure, however twisted from it. Should we simply leave people to their self-destructive?
Wait, let's go back, because this is great. This is the big difference.
Leave people to their self-destructive pleasures, even if the pursuit of that pleasure is actually making them miserable and causing despair in the long run?
Yes, Matt, yes. You don't get to make those judgments for other people. Look at that look. My word, Karen. The disapproving look. Yes, Matt, you do need to let people do things that you don't approve of, even if you're relatively sure that it will make them miserable in the long run. Let me give you an example. You often rail against the tendency of some modern feminist teachings that are teaching women to put off having children till later in life, maybe staying single. You rail against dinks, dual income, no children, because you think ultimately when these people are old, they're going to be lonely and bitter and regret it. Well, Matt, if we're going to use your teaching or your logic, your conservative logic, should there be laws forcing people who are fertile to have children? Should there be laws or penalties for women who decide not to get married? Because after all, Matt, you think that they're going to die old and miserable and surrounded by cats. You may even be correct. Let's pretend you are right, that every person who chooses to not get married and remain childless is going to die old and bitter and crazy cat people. Does that mean there should be a law against it? Because you were like, should we just allow these people to do these things? Yes. Yes, we should, as far as the law is concerned. Now, should you as a friend or a YouTube personality or any kind of teacher be trying to convince people to live otherwise? Yes, go right ahead. But we're talking about politics here. We are talking about law here. See, libertarianism is strictly a political philosophy. We only deal with the proper and justified use of force. The rest we leave up to person's individual consciences and voluntary association. And he finds that bad and evil. That's really, really interesting. I do not ever pretend that leaving somebody free is going to make them necessarily prosperous or happy. It's their job to find prosperity and happiness for themselves. All libertarianism offers them is freedom, because if you don't have freedom, then you have force. And if you have force, you don't have true human dignity. But Matt, all these single women, I guess you think we should just force them to get married to save them from their cat-filled future, huh?
These are all questions that libertarianism cannot answer and refuses to even consider.
Have I been refusing to consider it this whole time? Stop lying, Pinocchio. Tell the truth. Libertarianism does consider it. We just don't consider it to be a proper sphere of the law. Matt's problem when he encounters opposing philosophies is to just pretend like he is so smart that he thought of this, he thought of it, little cutie pie, but we're so stupid we walk into Wall's face first. And it just never occurred to us that those questions are out there. Gee willikers. No, Matt, I've spent this whole show considering it. Liar, liar, pants on fire.
How about a little fire, Scarecrow? Oh!
Here. All right, we're going to get comments back on the screen. So again, we just dealt with foundational presuppositions here to show once again that fundamentally at its core, conservatism is different from libertarianism. To confound the two is simply not to understand libertarianism. And what's happening and why some people get these confused is they'll see a libertarian who happens to be personally conservative. They may be a very strict religious churchgoer that doesn't believe in sex before marriage, doesn't drink or chew or hang with people who do. But all of those are personal preferences. They'd never put it into force, into law. You cannot look at these superficial preferences and think you necessarily know someone's political position. That is the sad state of the world today, that when you see someone who orders their life in a certain way, that you assume that they would want to pick up Chekhov's gun and force everyone to live that way, because that is the society that we live in. And conversely, if you see a libertarian who happens to be much more socially liberal or might be personally a libertine, that you think that they just want everyone to live that way. No, they just want freedom. This is why I say, when you hear someone like Matt saying, should we just let people do that? That's why I say, ultimately, consistent conservatives hate freedom and want you to hate it as much as they do. And before you go, the left, of course, we could talk about the left another time, but we're talking about conservatives right now. The fundamental foundation of their philosophy is not actual freedom. And libertarians, that is their fundamental presupposition. Like I said in the last video, we are believers in freedom, even in the days of snow and ice. All right, that is going to be it for this evening. If you notice during all the clips, I settled down because the dog wasn't barking, so I didn't hear those weird noises in the background. Now that we're done with the main part of the show, that's one of my main the autism quirks. Even a tiny little sound, it just gets amplified and amplified and amplified because it's like a sensory disorder until it drives me absolutely crazy. Wayne can be sitting next to me and he does this little thing with his fingers and it's a tiny little click. But after like 10 seconds, it's like boom, boom. It now you know how to drive me crazy. If you're one of these people that do this constantly, I think that's a violation of the non-aggression principle. That's all I can say. All right, I hope you have an awesome night. Mi guapas de libertad.
Given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business, not because they want to